Welcome to First Dates and Soulmates, where we believe that every princess deserves a Vespa ride through Trastevere. I am your co-host, Meg Casebolt.
And I'm Nikki McKnight.
And today we are continuing our exploration of romantic comedies through the decades. You remember that last month, or maybe 2 months ago, we did rom-coms of the 40s. And this week we're doing two rom-coms of the 50s. We're doing Audrey Hepburn and Gregory Peck in Roman Holiday. And we're doing Marilyn Monroe and Laurence Olivier in The Prince and the Showgirl. So, Nikki, what were your thoughts about this? We sort of like pitched it live on the pod and finally got around to watching.
Yeah, it's so funny because this is really making me redefine or at least understand how the definition of romantic comedy has changed.
Yes.
Because even in His Girl Friday and A Philadelphia Story, which was the two we did when we were talking about the 1940s, there was like some slapstick kind of screwball comedy, like rat-a-tat dialogue. And like the situation that the couples were in was weird because they were both like divorced and, you got back together with the one you were supposed to be with all along, but it still kind of felt like a decent ending for both of these characters.
Cary Grant wasn't the worst guy ever.
He wasn't the worst. He was on the list. He had issues. But when I looked at these two, I had never seen either one of these films. Obviously, I was very familiar with Roman Holiday just in general. Like, I know the Vespa scene. I know that Princess Anne is like going somewhere, and I knew it was in Rome, and I know it made Rome very famous because it was one of the first US films based purely on location. So I kind of knew about it. And Prince and the Showgirl, I didn't really know. The only real Marilyn cultural references I know are like 7-Year Itch, the white dress. I know Some Like It Hot just because of the scene in Clueless where they talk about Some Like It Hot. But I wasn't really familiar with Marilyn's work, and I hadn't seen My Week with Marilyn, which was the video that, like the movie that they wrote that was like the week that Marilyn was working on, Prince and the Showgirl, which I believe it won an Oscar, or she was nominated for
Michelle
an Oscar.
Williams.
Yeah, because she played Marilyn in that movie. But I wasn't very familiar with either of these plots, and I really went into them thinking, what is going to be the big difference here between the 40s and 50s? What is going to happen in terms of the script or how things are presented. It was fun because Roman Holiday was black and white. It was supposed to be in color, but apparently like production delays they're like, no, we're going to do it in black and white. And then Prince and the Showgirl was in color. So there was just a lot of interesting things, and it totally didn't clue in for me until literally before we started recording that you're like, oh, they're both about royalty. And I went, oh, yeah, there's royalty in both of these films.
Well, royalty and a commoner, too. The class distinction of, and, in Roman Holiday, she's secret royalty, which I know we talked about quite a bit back in like April. But then with Prince and the Showgirl, it's very clearly he's a quote unquote prince, even though he's not a prince. The name of the thing is Prince and the Showgirl, and he's a regent, which I was just like...
His Grand Ducal Highness was an interesting character. So Meg, like, had you seen either one of these films before, or like what were your general impressions of these two films?
I had never seen either before, but similar to you, it was like I knew the cultural impact of Marilyn Monroe as an actress. I knew the cultural impact of Roman Holiday on, sort of just like the city of Rome. Nerd alert. I did a study abroad in Rome, so I was like very much like, oh, I've been there. Like just that excitement of the city and seeing the city come to life again, and seeing the city from the 50s and not the aughts when I was there.
That's what I was there too. When I was like, oh, it was so nice. And then it was shit when I went.
But then also like it had just been through a war. Right. Yeah. And like Rome was never bombed the way that London was bombed. But there was that certain feeling of life that Rome just brings out. So yeah, I loved Roman Holiday even more than I thought I would. But I think a lot of that was just like the setting was great, and Gregory Peck was great, and Audrey Hepburn was great. But the story itself, I was like, well, this is fine.
I was listening to an episode of I Hate It, But I Love It. And I can't remember what movie they were talking about. I think it was maybe the original Aliens. Like, it's still good, but you watch some of those films and go, oh, that's kind of trite, or that doesn't seem very innovative. And it's like, no, it's because we've seen everything that came after it that built on that this no longer feels new and interesting and disruptive in a way, when in fact it was the originator of that. So again, it was kind of interesting to look at both of these films and see a little bit of the trickle down effect they had into like more modern, like 80s and 90s rom-coms is definitely like my sweet spot. But I also have very strong feelings about how I liked the production design for both. I loved the individual characters. Not a fan of the story very much in either one. I got a little bit of the ick in a couple of these, which I'm sure
Yeah.
we will discuss.
Lots of ick moments in this.
Yeah. So, for those
Yeah.
of you who have not seen it, just a real quick summary about these movies. So, Roman Holiday came out in 1953. It has a 96% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. So, it is a
Hell
very
yeah.
critically acclaimed film. And you have a European Princess Anne. She is princess of an unnamed European country, generally thought to be somewhere in Eastern Europe. She's on this grand tour of Western Europe, and she's giving all of these speeches, and she's handing over plaques, and she's accepting ribbons, and she's very overwhelmed by her schedule. And she decides to, in the middle of the night, after her personal doctor gives her an injection to calm her down, creepy, she
Oh my god,
escapes.
the worst.
I know, she escapes and falls asleep like on a park bench or a wall, where she is discovered by Joe Bradley, played by Gregory Peck, who happens to be an American reporter. And he doesn't recognize her, but he doesn't really want to leave her there. So he takes her back to his hotel room. And he finds out the next day that she is the missing Princess Anne, who the palace has put out a statement saying, oh, she's sick. All of her engagements are canceled. Nope. And Joe decides that he's going to go around with her and try to get an exclusive in-depth story, because he's made a bet with his editor that he can get an exclusive. And a friend of his is following along with his little cigarette lighter camera to take photos. But they just kind of sees how wonderful she is, and she cuts her hair, and when her country's kind of like guards come to get her at a party that she went to, that the barber who cut her hair invited her to, she like slams a guitar over someone's head, and eventually she does go back, and then the very next day she goes and does this press conference that she'd originally canceled, and she sees Joe Bradley in the front row. They kind of have a moment, and then they depart. And it's like, oh, we had a moment, and it was great. So that's the end of Roman Holiday. The Prince and the Showgirl came out in 1957. It has a 50% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. But if you look at a lot of Marilyn Monroe movie like blogs, like this scores quite higher in the general kind of thought process of Marilyn's work. So a traveling party of royals from Central Europe arrives in England for the coronation of one of the kings of George. And the visiting Prince Regent, played by Laurence Olivier, who is currently running the country for his 16-year-old son. He goes to this musical theater production of The Coconut Girl. He meets Elsie, played by Marilyn Monroe, and is just like, oh, she's so funny, and she has a wardrobe malfunction, and she's kind of ditzy. So he invites her to have dinner at the embassy building that they are currently taking over. Some interesting tension arises. I have thoughts. I have so many thoughts. But she eventually ends up staying in the embassy for days because she kind of makes friends with the Queen Dowager and gets to go to the coronation, because she's like, you're really thin. You'll be more comfortable to fit within the carriage. You're going to be my lady in waiting for the day. Here's a bunch of jewels. Here's an order from our country. Come sit in this royal carriage and literally go to Westminster Abbey with us to watch this coronation. She starts hanging out with Nikki, the young prince, because he's trying to do a coup against his father. There's a whole bunch of instability and political intrigue. And then at the end, after all is said and done, the Prince Regent says, hey, in 18 months, I'll be giving up the throne. And she's like, oh, in 18 months, my contract with the Coconut Girl show theater is over. Who knows? And then they also walk away from each other.
This isn't even a happy for now in either case. This is just like well, that was fun.
It's so weird because there's been a lot of talk in the romance zeitgeist, I'll say, on whether or not a romance has to have a happy ever after. Because there was an author with great amount of controversy who had two main characters undergo a, trigger warning, suicide pact. And that was seen as a happy ending. And there was a lot of up in the arms, because I do believe it was a queer book, that it did not go well in the zeitgeist. There was a lot of criticism of this. And then that kind of turned into a bunch of like posts on Threads and other sites of going down like, well, this isn't a happy ending and this happened. We even had this conversation about like The Notebook and 500 Days of Summer in our Would You Rather episode. I'm like, these are not romances in our mind. So both of these movies really made me wonder. They don't really end up together. Roman Holiday, they certainly won't be together. Prince and the Showgirl, I have doubts on whether or not they would actually connect again in 18 months for anything meaningful. So what makes these a romance?
Just because there's some sort of spark, there's a kiss.
Mm-hmm.
There's a kiss, and therefore it's a romance.
Yeah.
And maybe their definition was different in the 50s of romance, where maybe it was just as soon as Audrey Hepburn is cast into a role. Although that's not true, because she definitely has had some more, in Sabrina or in Breakfast at Tiffany's. Like, she's not the romantic lead in those stories. But
yeah, which is funny because this is her breakout role.
Yeah.
This is her first big film, because she had done like some Dutch films and she had done some English films, but this was her breakout role. And I had mentioned to you before we started recording about the billing for the film. So Gregory Peck's contract with his studio, within the studio system, was that he would always get sole top billing. And that's the way it was. So Audrey Hepburn, an unknown, was never going to get an above a top line billing. And then apparently they did this film together, and Gregory Peck was so like, oh my gosh, she is luminous. She is wonderful. She's going to get nominated for an Oscar. She's going to be a huge hit. I want her on the top billing too. Because part of this was not necessarily reputation repair for him, but he did have this kind of reputation that he didn't play lighthearted characters. He played, when I think Gregory Peck, I think Atticus Finch.
Atticus Finch.
Everybody thinks Atticus Finch from How to Kill a Mockingbird. So he saw this as like an opportunity to kind of like lighten his own image with someone who was going to be a huge star like Audrey. So then if you look at the movie poster, they share top billing.
This is so interesting because I think the exact opposite is what played out for The Prince and the Showgirl, because Laurence Olivier, he had this play written for him like 4 or 5 years earlier. It was called The Sleeping Prince, because the idea was, he's just like sleeping through life, and then this woman comes along and brings him to life. And the production in the West End was with his not yet wife, Vivien Leigh, from Gone with the Wind. And she played it as a British character because it was set in Britain and it was on stage in Britain. And she actually tried to do it in Broadway and it completely flopped. But it was very much more by the book, much more kind of sharp, witty approach to the character of Elsie. But Laurence Olivier wanted to lighten his perspective and the way that people thought of him. So when he started talking to people about who to cast in this, because he'd been Richard III, he'd been King Lear. He wanted to show his softer side. And so they cast Marilyn Monroe, but they didn't actually cast Marilyn Monroe in a traditional way. It was, in kind of the old school, this is the Paramount picture and this is the Fox picture, and cast members are in there. This is an MGM actor, and therefore they have to stay in that house. Marilyn, a couple of years prior to this, she'd already done Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. She'd done How to Marry a Millionaire. So she broke out of her contract. She canceled her contract with Fox and she made her own production company. And she was the first woman to have her own female-led production company because she wanted to stop the typecasting of being a dumb blonde. And so The Prince and the Showgirl was the first dual production company with a woman-owned producer, where Laurence Olivier was still the director, but Marilyn Monroe was a producer. Laurence Olivier was also a producer. And so it led to a lot of off-screen problems because he was the director and his approach to it was always like, I'm the director and you're supposed to do what I say. I want you to show up. I want you to be pretty. That's your job. And since he'd originated the role on the West End, he was like, this is how this role is played. But they wanted a more global appeal, which is why they went to an American actress who already had the chops, who already had the opportunity to get some of the creative control. And she wanted to be more of a method actress, and she wanted to have her motivation show. And she just didn't want to show up and read lines the way that Laurence Olivier was classically trained. And you follow the lines. And when you do Shakespeare, you read the iambic pentameter and you bring, and it sort of works on screen because he is this stoic, staid, colder performance, and she's supposed to be the warm, emotive, breathier performance that sort of like
Mm-hmm.
brings the sex appeal and brings more warmth and, oh, you just need more love in your life and all that. But
Mm-hmm.
apparently behind the scenes, opposite of Gregory Peck saying, oh, Audrey Hepburn's going to be a star, let's be co-leads on this, Laurence Olivier was like, no, she's the worst, I never want to work with her again. He actually, I think the quote that I read somewhere was like, it's like trying to teach Urdu to a person who is deaf and mute. Like, that
I tell you,
impossible.
these old school men actors, they were dicks, but they really had a good way to insult people. Like the turns of phrase, like I can't help but admire some of them.
What was the one that I
Um,
sent you? It's like trying to control Marilyn is like trying to move Mercury with a fork.
yeah,
What a
yeah.
dick. Like, nothing about her performance endeared me to him, but the more I read about the production of it, the more I was like, wow, you're just like the most uptight, like, I am a classically trained thespian and you will respect me, without actually recognizing the fact that you have this like very talented and well respected actress that you're supposed to be working with, who's actually going to bring people into the box office. She is
Yeah.
the reason people are showing up to this, not you.
Mm-hmm. I would love to talk about our two heroines because I think they're
Yes.
both so great. So
Mm-hmm.
Audrey as Princess Anne, Marilyn as Elsie. They are just, I think the word I wrote down when I was watching both of them is like luminous. Not like they're lit beautifully. So production design, I think, on both of these was really great. There's a couple scenes, especially with Marilyn, when she's like lying on the couch, I think after she's drunk for the second time, and how she's lit is just like, oh my God, she's gorgeous.
Yeah.
But they are just so fun and quick and like kind of like, I don't want to say like silly, but there's just something so light about both of them. And the fact that Roman Holiday was in black and white and Prince and the Showgirl was on color, it made the movies, and when I was watching them, feel so much further apart than they actually were. They were
Mm-hmm.
only 4 years apart, 5 years apart.
Mm-hmm.
But it gave the movies such a different vibe to it that Princess Anne did feel like her outbursts and her wanting to kind of rail against this her own system and the expectations put upon her felt like she was being framed as, like, go, poor Anne, but she's so good, like we love Anne, contrasting her with Elsie, that it was like, oh, like a little bit dumb but very
Mm-hmm.
smart in ways. I wrote down a couple lines that I definitely want to talk about where it was made very clear that Elsie was a lot smarter than what she was portraying. But she's so charming, and how she talks with her friends and how she was waving at her friends from the carriage on the way to Westminster. Like they're both just so like effervescent in
Mm.
different ways that I was just like, to watch them both it was a joy to watch both of them and to see both of them work.
They really shine on the screen. And even though, you know, obviously you've got Marilyn in that white dress for literally the entire thing.
The
She's
entire
wearing
film.
an evening gown that
Yeah.
is like, you know, mermaid cut, low
Mm-hmm.
cut. The only
Mm-hmm.
time that I ever felt any spark of chemistry between Marilyn and Olivier was like when he had to keep putting that brooch right in the center of her cleavage. And then she would take
Mm-hmm.
it off and give it back to him to ask for it again later. Like that was the only moment where I was like, oh, they actually have a like this much teeny tiny chemistry. But
Little
other than
bit.
that, I saw nothing about this. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but you know, her being in that dress and sort of being inappropriate and, you know, being wild and spontaneous and expecting when somebody invites you to dinner that they're going to have dinner with you and they're going to sit next to you and they're going to talk to you. What? Um, but then contrasting that, having Marilyn in this almost like white virginal style dress and saying that
Mm-hmm.
she wasn't going to go straight to sex. She wasn't interested in sex. He made a pass at her and she turned it down and then she stayed, which was weird. But then we also have Audrey. We have Princess Anne, who you can tell she never comes out and says she's never been kissed, but you know she's never been kissed.
Yeah, she's far too
Even when,
sheltered. And she was
yeah, even when she cuts her,
24.
yeah, even when she cuts her hair, she still dresses very conservatively. She's got, you know, the neckline straight up to her
Mhm.
neck with the sweet little bow tie
Mhm.
on it, like the little
Mhm.
pussycat bow tie on it. And she's got the longer, loose A-line dress. And everything about her is more conservative. But and part of that is even when she's the princess, her princess
Mhm.
outfits are much more loose. I mean, they're tighter
Yeah.
on the waist because her waist is like 4 inches
So
around. It's
tiny. Yeah.
insane. Um, but her dresses are off the shoulder and there's a lot of
Mhm.
fabric and flowing. But
Mhm.
even then, you get this feeling that even though she's wearing more conservative clothing and she's very rarely behind closed doors with Gregory Peck alone if she's not
Mhm.
asleep.
Mhm.
um, so it feels more conservative in the romantic side of things,
Mhm.
but she is so light and charming and
Mhm.
likable and
Mhm.
naive,
Mhm.
but not innocent.
Yes, I think that's a good distinction. I really struggled when watching these films, more so Prince and the Showgirl, to separate the characters from the actors, especially with Marilyn.
Yeah,
Because
with
again, from
Marilyn.
a modern lens, and as someone who didn't grow up watching these films, I know her from the pop culture references. All I could think during this watching Prince and the Showgirl was, I wonder how many drugs she was on. I wonder how unhappy she was off screen. Because she was 30 when filming. Olivier was 49. So there's, almost a 20-year age gap. In Roman Holiday, it was a 14-year age gap, I think. I think Audrey was 24 and Gregory Peck was 37. So there, when I'm looking at these like beautiful Hollywood ingenues with like male power players in Hollywood who were significantly older than their female co-star, that was playing in the back of my mind the entire time, especially during their quote unquote meet cutes. Because I was like, there was this ominous sense of danger for me. And oh my God, I just hope they're going to be okay. Because both of these men, at least at the beginning for Joe Bradley, I feel like he redeems himself at the end. But I just wanted both of these women to be safe.
Yeah.
And that's a weird thing to want someone to feel in what is ostensibly a romantic comedy. I hope they don't get attacked.
Yeah, and I think, even when Princess Anne has been drugged, right?
I
Which
know.
without consent, she has been
Oh my
drugged by the
God.
doctor who's like, oh, you'll just feel better. You'll feel sleepy. It'll be fine. And then she sneaks out and she falls asleep on a park bench, which is a very dangerous thing to do, especially for a young woman alone. And then Joe's like, okay, I'll just pay for her cab to send her back. Like that was a really chivalrous thing to do, but she didn't remember where she was. She was really out of it. So he brought her back to his place and like let her sleep on the couch. But that could have gone very badly.
Mm-hmm.
Same with all those moments where I'm just gonna call him Olivier because what the fuck
Yeah.
ever. Where
No,
he
his
was
his
like,
his his Grand Ducal Highness. Thank you.
yeah, I
He's
think his
not
name was
serene.
Charles.
He's not serene
He's not
anymore.
serene. Oh
He's
my god, it was
Grand
so
Ducal.
boring. That was so boring. But when he invites her to dinner, and the first thing that he's like, "Here, have these 3 shots of vodka," and she's like, "But I don't want the vodka," and he's like, "Well, you won't even feel it." And
Yeah,
then
just
she
sip it.
has
You won't
like
get drunk.
yeah, but no, you need to take them as shots, but they won't actually impact you. They'll just make you feel better. They'll make you feel euphoric. And then she gets drunk and he's like, "Oh, that was so little that I would give that much vodka to a 4-year-old in their milk. What's wrong with her?" But she says no and he's like, "Yes, you will drink this." I was like,
Yeah,
Duke.
because even prior to that, when she shows up and she realizes it's not a party, it's like dinner for two, and she sees it. You have Northbrook, I think is his name. He's like the civil
Yeah.
servant assigned to
Northbrook,
the
Northbridge, something. Yeah.
yeah, something like that. Good old Northy. Is like the attaché for this royal family while they're in London and to kind of deal with whatever they want. And he's the one that picked up Elsie from the theater and brought her here. And she sees the two dinner plates and she's immediately like, nope,
I'm
I
out.
know what this is. And Northbrook is like, it's just, what is so bad about a little tete-a-tete? And she's like, I've had to fight my way out of many tete-a-tetes because and she starts doing these lines that she's heard from ostensibly other men who have tried to get her into these situations of, no, we don't need servants. Let's just serve ourselves. Or here, we'll just sit like this and we'll do all this. And then Northbrook convinces her to stay, which I was like, oh my God, somebody please protect this woman. And then when Olivier's character comes in, he says all of the things that she has
Yep.
said that other men, oh, we don't need servants. We don't need this. And then he starts like force feeding her vodka. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. And then the thing that I actually did love about that scene after, I was like, oh my God, please don't assault this woman.
And
He
champagne.
starts
Vodka and champagne. He's
their champagne.
mixing.
We don't want to do that. But he starts like taking all these phone calls and reading things and doing things. And then she starts miming the whole dinner and conversation. Like she's sitting by herself and Olivier's character's in the background, like doing his regenty Grand Ducal Highness shit. And she's like, oh yes, Elsie, would you like more champagne? Why, yes, I would love more champagne, because he's ignoring her now. And she's drunk and she's like, I'm here. I might as well have a conversation with myself because I am a charming individual.
And I know we aren't getting too big on the cinematography, but there was a moment during that scene where I was like, I would love to see this enacted on the stage. It was just so perfectly blocked, like it was meant to be on a stage where you could see her in the forefront, you know, right at that front of the stage. And then he was in the background sort of talking on the phone. And it would have been such an interesting dynamic. And that was one of the reasons I was like, oh, I want to read more about the play that inspired this, because I think so much of that set design was based around that one room and all the doors and people walking in and out backwards. And I could see a lot of what would have worked on the stage. But then they're like, oh, but as long as it's a play, let's also have these big coronation scenes and these parade routes and this big waltz and all of these other bigger moments. But really the core of it was the two of them in a closed door room together. Which you don't see. I mean, when we were looking at the movies in the 40s, there was always someone else there. There was even like the couples that had been married before. There was always a chaperone. There was always somebody else there, like even the bathing gown would, you know, but now it was the two of them alone. And he's clearly just expecting to get in her pants or her very beautiful evening gown, as the case may be. And she's not having it, but he doesn't kick her out.
No, and that was one thing I really couldn't get a handle on in that film, was she was creeped out by the dinner, stayed, and then he starts kind of playing to what he thinks, like he's like, oh, my beloved, and clearly he just wants to get laid.
He's like, why didn't we perfume the room? Why were there no violins? That part was so actually fairly clever.
It was very funny. Oh yeah, when he's sent off, he goes, doesn't one of my valets play the violin? They're like, yeah, Franz. Well, where is he? He's sleeping. Wake him up and have him play outside the door. And then that became a running joke that like later on in the film, an entire orchestra is sitting outside the door, directed by Franz on the violin, and there's like all these other instruments. I thought that was very funny. But like he's doing all this to manipulate her. And then she like wakes up madly in love with him. She's like, oh, I'll come back later after the theater, and I'll come back after here. And he's like, oh no, I'm going to call the other lady from the theater that I know and have her come over because she's easier.
Because she puts out.
I could not get a handle on when she actually like fell in love, because so much of it felt like she was manipulating him right back, which is a dynamic I really enjoyed. She's like, yeah, I'm going to get gifts and I'm going to get here and I'm going to hang out. And I got that with everybody except the regent. Like when she finds out about Nikki's plot to overthrow his dad as regent, because she speaks German, which I thought was a great reveal that she actually understood the entire message.
And I love that the justification was, well, I was born in Milwaukee.
Yeah. And her real name is a German last name, because when the whole passport thing at the end, he like says the whole thing. Anyway. But like she starts playing with him and the regent finds out that she heard the message. She's like, no, I'm not going to tell you. Like, what do you? So she felt so in control, but it was that whole I'm in love. I'm like, is she really, or is she playing him right back? And then I think she is. And then his whole change at the end when Nikki goes to Northbrook, is my father okay? He hugged me and he called me his darling boy. And then he's a much like lighter, bigger character at the end. Like that, I could not get a handle on when for each of those characters they actually started to like the other person, much less love the other person. I was confused by their dynamic many times throughout that film.
There was a moment in the first night where Elsie is like, if you kiss me, I'm going to fall in love with you. It's happened every time before, twice. And I was like, what the fuck is this weird? Like,
She's so fucking charming.
we're in the 50s, so maybe we have to point out that, like, oh, I've only kissed 2 guys, but I'm going to fall in love with you the minute that you kiss me, right? Like, okay, if this is some of that, like, puritanical bullshit, fine. But then she wakes up the next morning and she's like, it's 1911 and it's the day of the coronation and I fell in love with the Grand Ducal blah, blah, blah. And he just, like, looks at her like, disgust, just like, what the fuck are you talking about? I just wanted to get laid, you know. And then he tells her to leave, and the dowager queen is the one who's like, you should stay with me. And all the time, Nikki, I'm there going, why isn't she just trying to seduce the king? Why is she dealing with this ornery old 50-year-old guy who's pretending to be 40?
Granted, I don't really want her to seduce a 16-year-old, but I do
also
take your
true.
point.
But like, if you're like, oh, I want to go to the ball.
Monocle.
He has a monocle.
He looks, and his accent the entire time. I'm like, why does anybody like this character? I'm on Nikki. Overthrow the government. Work with the Bulgarians or the Germans or whoever. I'm like, overthrow the government.
God, he's the worst. There's no redeeming value in this hero.
No, because even at the end, when Elsie kind of convinces him, you know, it would make you like, well, you know, be really good and like save your relationship with your son if you did a democratic election. You know, that would just make you look so smart. And he goes, I could do it because I'll release this guy I imprisoned and make everybody hate him. And they'll be so impressed by my largesse and my mercy that I will win the election in a landslide. This is a great idea. And I was like, why am I rooting for this man?
I never was rooting for this man. I was like, still overthrow him and then Nikki can be elected democratically.
Yes.
Let's talk about some of the politics in this one that we really don't talk that much about in Roman Holiday. So this was released in 57. It was written in 53, right? So pretty close at the end of the war. It's based in England, but it has these European pieces of it. Even in that first scene where they're looking at the map to be able to like be like, this is where Carpathia is. And they're like, this alliance, this alliance, this alliance, this alliance. If these fall, then all of Europe falls, right? And in my mind, as the history buff and European history lover, I'm like, oh, this is the Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria, which is the reason that the Great War started when he was assassinated. That there are all of these alliances, and if we can get this democratic election in place, then World War I won't happen and people won't die. And all that you need is a showgirl who fucking loves things, and then the world will be saved. But also, you know, even though it's set in 1911, it's released in the 50s, which is this time of American values being broadcast globally, and the Cold War happening, and we have Russia wanting to be communist and having that going on, and then America coming in and going, no, but free and democratic elections. This is also coming out at right around the time of the coronation of Queen Elizabeth. So people were really interested in the British monarchy, but also recognizing the decreased power of the monarchy and monarchies in general throughout Europe. So there was this sort of like interest in royals while going, oh, but they're just figureheads. They're not making the politics anymore. So they don't necessarily, maybe even in this case, it's like, well, if Elsie has her way as the spontaneous American who's bringing in free speech, who's bringing in free and democratic elections, then he can be free to be with her, which is like the stupidest reason for democratic elections. But yeah, that's all I kept thinking about is this idea of trying to work American propaganda about political systems into a movie that really didn't feel qualified to have the conversation.
I love that you brought that up. When Roman Holiday was released, it actually got a very huge marketing boost from the very real story of Princess Margaret and Peter Townsend, because that is when their relationship kind of went public. All I know about this relationship is from the first season of The Crown, because Vanessa Kirby is resplendent as Princess Margaret.
She's incredible in that role.
Princess Margaret wanted to marry Peter Townsend, and he had been divorced. So the Queen, Elizabeth, her sister, did not allow the marriage, and that caused a very big schism. But that relationship was happening publicly when Roman Holiday was released. So the studio actually attributes a lot of that movie's success to people seeing this real life like kind of class difference. For all that Townsend worked with the palace, he was not royal at all. He was essentially a commoner. And people looked at that relationship and were like, oh, that should be love, and on and on and on. So when Roman Holiday came out that it was, commoner and royal again, they were like, oh, look, it's this. And they get to maybe have a happy ending. And I thought that was funny. That was kind of mirroring that fascination with royals should be free to love who they want to love.
Which, again, is a very American idealistic approach to things. I mean, I don't know, maybe you feel differently about this as a Canadian, too. The difference between a revolution to throw this off and create a new form of government versus sort of like a special relationship of we're still connected to each other. So there may be a little bit more respect for a monarchy in that case. I'm really spiraling here.
It is an interesting thing to think about. There is a Monarchist League of Canada because there are many people that believe we should still be a part of the Commonwealth and have that relationship with the crown because it was not through revolution. And there are other people who are like, literally the only relationship we have in terms of like royal family is the queen and probably the king. I haven't seen any. Is on our coins and on some of our money. Most of the money's now been replaced, though. It's not Elizabeth's face. It's been famous Canadian figures have been added to our bills. And we have the Governor General of Canada, who is appointed by the crown to kind of oversee our parliament, which is like, it's all weird. It's all weird shit. Honestly, it does not impact our day-to-day life for the most part, but the British government royalty doesn't really impact British people's life in the day-to-day other than ceremonial. And I think that's pretty much the same for us.
But this also got me thinking a little bit about the tours that Queen Elizabeth went on when she was first coronated, right? Yeah. Like that tour of, and probably very similar to what Princess Anne was going through, and maybe Princess Margaret was also going on some of the tours. And again, a lot of my knowledge of this is based on The Crown.
The Crown, clearly. This historical text, this entirely historical, accurate historical text.
Netflix historical is what we're going to call it henceforth. It's also from Scotland times, so kilts. Maybe,
kilting time.
But I think also there's this reality happening in the 50s of especially, post-war NATO alliances, a lot more of the British Commonwealth being something that they want to preside over and visit places, and the excitement around that. That's probably also in the zeitgeist at the time that Roman Holiday is coming out. And therefore having the princess from the foreign country come to the city and have a chance to see it. And I loved, there's this little moment at the end where one of the journalists asks, what's your favorite city on the tour? And she's, Princess Anne is making eyes at Gregory Peck at that moment, at Joe. And so she's like, she sort of misses it. And one of her advisors is like, every city's wonderful. You love every city equally.
They're all great.
Yeah. And she starts to give the line of like, well, every city has its own. Rome was my favorite. Rome.
Yeah. No, I love that. Because it made me think about transformation for all the characters. Stories have transformation arcs with characters. And while I didn't really believe Olivier's arc, make no sense. I feel like in 2 weeks from the end of that period, he's going to be back to his normal government overthrowing self.
You're giving him 2 weeks. I give him 2 hours, 2 minutes.
Yeah. Nikki's going to say something in the carriage ride on the way back to like the ship or whatever to take him home, and then shit's going to go down. And like Elsie, I don't really think she had too much of like a transformation arc. I feel like she was kind of in the same spot. But what I really loved, I think Joe Bradley had like a miniature arc. We don't know what he's going to do after that, but he kind of starts the movie off as he slept through when the press conference was originally scheduled for, because he was hungover because he'd been playing and losing at poker the night before, whatever card game. And he thinks that getting this exclusive out of Anne without her knowledge that he's a reporter is going to be the thing. And of course when Irving, the photographer, comes back and tries to give the photos to his editor, he keeps like tripping him and dumping coffee on him. He's like, Irving, you're so clumsy. But then at the end, when she's kind of greeting members of the press and he's just kind of standing there and they have their little eye moment, I was like, okay, cool. Like he realized that she is a person and on. But my favorite transformation was Anne. Yes. After Joe Bradley drops her off at the embassy. Yes. So she's been missing for like a day.
About 24 hours, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, just over 24 hours. So she comes in and all of her the countess is her lady in waiting and all these other staff and dignitaries are like, oh my God, like where have you been? I have a duty to do. You have a duty to do. And she has that line of like, if it were not for the duty I feel to my family and my country, I would not be back here. I likely wouldn't have come back at all. And this just because at the beginning, when the Countess is reading off her schedule, she's just doing it by rote. You do this, you get changed, you do this, you give a speech. And she's like, which speech? The plaque speech. Oh, is that youth in
Thank
progress?
you.
No.
No, thank you. Thank
Right?
you. No,
And she
thank
knows,
you.
and all of her speeches have names. So she goes, is that the
Yeah.
Youth in Progress one? No. Oh, it's Nations of People. Yes, it's that speech. But
Mm-hmm.
she gets back in and she's like, giving them this liner of like, I honestly would not have come back if it were not for duty. So
Mm-hmm.
please don't ever use that word again. But then she's also like, I give you all permission to leave. Like she fucking dismisses them. And they're like, okay. And then the Countess brings in like her milk and biscuit or whatever. And she's like, no, I don't want that. Okay, I'm going to leave. And then she just has a very quiet moment to herself in her room after all the doors are closed. Like, I fucking loved that moment that Anne is like, I know what my schedule is. I know what my duty is. I don't need you to talk down to me like I am a child, even though I realized I threw a tantrum, which is why I left. And the doctor had to forcibly inject me with a sedative, even as I said I didn't want it. Yeah. But I
Mm-hmm.
loved it when she like fucking dismissed them all in the most polite way possible. And I just thought that was such a great ending for her. And then when they get to that press conference and she's giving her answers, you can kind of see a little bit of a spark that she realizes she's saying the right thing. She knows what she's supposed to say when asked about the economy, when asked about this. But that moment when she's like, yes, all of these cities, no, Rome, always Rome. I was just like, ah, I love this for her because I believe that she is going to take some of that home with her. So I loved that with Anne.
Her own autonomy becomes so much more
Mm-hmm.
important, you know? And a lot of times when you're writing or creating a story, your character starts reactive in some
Mm-hmm.
way, you know, that hero's journey, or usually it's some sort of midpoint shift where they sort of take control of their lives. But there
Mm-hmm.
is usually in those first couple chapters of a book, there's a reactivity happening and they have to take
Mm-hmm.
control and choose to move forward in their own way. And I feel like Anne does this so perfectly because she's so reactive. You know, the first moment you see her, she loses her shoe because she's like itching her leg. She's uncomfortable and you
Yes.
can tell she's uncomfortable, but she's not allowed to move to go get her shoes. So she has to get up to go dance in that moment. And she's
Mm-hmm.
she's being told, this is your schedule, this is where we're going. And then she's being physically like non-consensually sedated, right?
Mm-hmm.
um
Oh.
and it's not until the next morning when Joe gives her money that he doesn't have and he's like, okay, go home, and she chooses to go cut her hair.
Mm-hmm.
That's the moment where she becomes her own woman. That's the moment where she
Mm-hmm.
finally gets to make a decision for herself. Maybe for the first time in her life, she gets to make a
Yeah.
decision for herself.
I love that. Oh, I love that for her. There's so many just like little small moments I just want to like mention from my notes because they just made me laugh. So in Roman Holiday, when the inconspicuous agents coming off the plane, so basically they've kind of gone to her home country and said, Princess Anne is missing. Please send help. We want them inconspicuous plain clothes. And the dignitaries are like at the airport waiting for this plane. And all of a sudden, just like a walking line of like 30 quote unquote inconspicuous agents in black suits and black hats come off. And he's like, we said inconspicuous. So I thought that was hilarious. But also one of the things that I noticed with Princess and the Showgirl is when she is at the theater and she gets the letter inviting her to this dinner, her hair is long. It's like she has long blonde hair down to her butt. And it threw me for a moment because her hair is up the rest of the film and you don't realize how long it is. I just think of Marilyn with that short blonde bob, that to see her with like long blonde hair, it definitely threw me for a minute of like, why is she so beautiful? Like, holy shit, she's beautiful.
Both of them. Both of them. I just looked at their faces.
Mm,
There were various moments where they were, like you said, incredibly well lit, but there were moments where the camera just like held on them almost like it couldn't
mm-hmm,
stop. It couldn't look
mm-hmm.
away from
Oh,
these
beautiful.
two very different types of beauty. You
Mm-hmm,
know, Marilyn has that sort of seductress look to her, and
mm-hmm,
maybe part of that is that she was cast into these roles as the
mm-hmm,
bombshell, as the dumb blonde.
mm-hmm,
Um, Whereas Audrey has much more of a like kind of a refined look to
mm-hmm.
her, the darker hair, the darker eyes, but both of them, like that bone structure, I was just like,
Oh.
holy crap. These
Yeah.
women. These women.
Definitely what I would think when you think of Hollywood starlet, those are the names you come up with. It's
Yeah.
Hepburn, it's Monroe, it's Vivian Leigh. Right. Like
Katharine
there was
Hepburn
such a,
too, who are from our
yeah,
40s. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Just beautiful. I loved how it looked. Meg, what did you ship the most about the 1950s rom-coms that we have discussed today?
I mean, I certainly loved Roman Holiday more, but I think a part of that
Mm-hmm.
was just my own sort of nostalgia for Rome, like, and being able
Mm,
to see that they were really filming there
mm-hmm.
and being in the space and having her hand in the
Mm-hmm.
Bocca della Verità and that party right along the Tiber River, right like in front
Mm-hmm.
of Castel Sant'Angelo. And I was just like, oh, like it just made me so nostalgic is the wrong word, but just like it made my heart kind of beat a little harder to be like, oh, I just miss this
Mm-hmm.
city. It's just such a
Mm-hmm.
gorgeous city. And I
Yeah.
think that sometimes when the set design and the setting is done really well, like it was there, it
Mm-hmm.
becomes just as much of a character as the people who are acting it out. And that was my favorite part of the entire movie was just like the exploration of the city,
Mm-hmm.
followed very closely by the final shot of just the silent hallway with
Oh,
only
yeah.
Joe's footsteps walking away. And there's
Mm-hmm.
so much a part of me, having watched so many rom-coms, that I expected her to come running out in that final moment, and they left the
Mm-hmm.
shot wide. So if she had come
Mm-hmm.
back out to see him, she would, wait, Joe, wait. And she
Mm-hmm.
didn't. And I
Yeah.
loved that choice.
I love that you brought up that framing because I think in modern rom-coms that's what we would have expected, like one last kiss, one last hug, because even in the last shot of Prince and the Showgirl, the prince, regent, Nikki, and the dowager have all left. They're shooting from the interior, looking out to the front door, and you see the carriage move by, and you see the
Mhm.
dignitaries leave, and Elsie's there like packing up the various orders from this country that she's
Oh
been
my
given,
God.
and she's like packing up her things and getting her wrap. And while she's doing this, it's still holding that wide long shot on the door. That again, I had a moment of, is he going to come back and do
Mhm.
one last kiss, one last hug, one last something, or even one last look? I thought he might come back, look at her, hold, and then leave. But that also didn't happen. And I thought that again, I was like, is that our modern we want to see? Like we've talked about the grand gesture at the airport, like don't fuck with my logistics, but like hold on a big like dramatic kiss and hug, and then I am satisfied now. We will separate forever. Like
Yeah.
I was expecting that. I think it's better the way they did it in both senses, but I'm a schmoopy romantic and I want them to be together.
But I think there's a restraint that was present
Mm-hmm.
then that we no longer have. And I don't
True.
just mean, what was the name of the code that like you
The
couldn't show
Hays
people in
Code.
a bed together? Yeah, you
Hays
couldn't
Code.
kiss for more than this amount of time. And I
Mm-hmm.
definitely still felt that very strongly in both of these. Like
Mm-hmm.
when Joe finally kisses Anne, I'm like, yes. I didn't
I
really care that much about the
know.
kisses between Olivier and
No, because they
Elsie,
were
but
creepy when
they
she
were
was like kind
so
of lying
and he
down and he was like on her neck and her face. I
yeah.
was like, this is gross.
He was like kissing underneath her chin, and I was like, "This is
No,
fucking weird." Uh,
I don't like it. I don't like it at
nobody,
all.
nobody wants this. Stop.
No,
Nobody wants this, especially her. Well, please tell me more about my chin. And I was like, "This is weird. This is so
I don't
weird."
like it.
Um,
No.
but I felt that restraint that there. I
Mm.
think maybe it's because film was a newer format, and we weren't as saturated in these films where the happy ending happens with the grand gesture, and that's the expectation now.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to have the restraint to say no, they left,
Mm-hmm.
man.
Mm-hmm.
She's not coming back. That was
Mm-hmm.
the Roman holiday. That was, you got the 24 hours. And now for the rest of your life, you can think about those 24 hours very fondly. But she's a damn princess and she's not going to come kiss you. She already said, like, don't watch me turn that corner. I don't want you to see me go into that building. Like she
Mm-hmm.
knew she was walking away from him from that moment.
Mm.
So it worked well for the characters.
Yeah, I like it.
Um,
Cool.
what about you, Nikki? What was your favorite part of the 50s rom-coms?
Oh, what did I ship? I feel like there was just like individual acting moments from Hepburn and Monroe. Like I still think one of Anne, like when Anne gets her hair cut and she's just like sitting in the chair feeling how short it
Mm.
is was just such like a great moment of acting. But again, I just loved her thing at the end when she's like, "You are dismissed. Go away." Because she's so poised in there, and it just felt like a moment where they were like treating her like an adult and like a princess. Like she's 24, so she's young, but I just loved that whole moment. And then with with Elsie, I just love her and the Queen Dowager every time that like they got into another thing. Like she's getting ready to leave and then something happens. She goes, "I'm staying here again." And then like the first day they wake up, she comes into the coffee room with like this robe on. And you know his Grand Ducal Highness is getting his face shaved, and they kind of just look at her come in, and like nobody says anything, and she doesn't say anything. She comes in, gets something to eat or drink, and then like she
Water,
leaves
yeah.
again. Yeah, and we're like, why is she still here? And then the next morning she wakes up and Northbrook opens the curtains and she's just out on the patio, and she's like, what is that? So
Why
these
is she
moments where it's
still
just
here?
like she's just hanging out, I thought was hysterical. I thought that was so funny, and I love that.
I want to add a shout out to the moment when Anne sees Joe in the audience,
Mm-hmm.
and her acting, Hepburn's acting,
Mm.
was so subtle
Yeah.
that you could see every emotion on her face and then it was gone. It was
Oh, it was so good.
masterpiece. That whole scene where
Mm-hmm.
she's restrained and he's just standing there watching her with this adoration in his eyes, where he finally can show her that he's known who she is all along.
Mm-hmm.
And it's dawning on her that she hadn't fooled him at all. And he's still gonna,
Mm-hmm.
and then you see her going like, is this gonna be the scandal?
Mm-hmm.
He's a fucking journalist. And
Yeah.
there's the photographer next to him. And then the photographers come forward and he shows that little, match or little lighter thing to
Cigarette
be
lighter
like,
camera.
yeah, I've been taking pictures of you this whole time. It's like it's almost like watching a car crash in slow motion, and then
Mm-hmm.
she works her way down that entire line, and the whole time the anticipation is just building slowly. Again, it comes to restraint. If this were
Mm-hmm.
being made now, they would not have been 8 people deep of her. Every time that
Mm-hmm.
somebody speaks to her, she answers in a different language or she knows the
Mm-hmm.
exact way to reply. But doing all of that to get her to Joe, oh my
Mm-hmm.
god, it was destructively
Mm-hmm.
beautiful.
Oh, and I even love too that Irving handed over the photos to her and says,
Yes.
"Here's some mementos from your time in Rome or something." And she realizes that he's also not going to sell the photos because the one
Mhm.
that she sees is her slamming the guitar over the guy's head. And I'm like, "Great photo. It's
Yeah,
going on
they're
my
looking at it
wall.
and
I
it's
would do
like,
this."
"Oh, look, her first cigarette." Like, they're so,
Hmm.
like
It's
like,
cute. I
enjoying
loved it.
reliving it.
Love it. Amazing. Madam Meg, what are you shipping this week?
I am going completely off the rails, different direction here. I am
It's alien
shipping
porn, isn't it?
no, Faye. It's Faye.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
I was like, what's the least princessy thing that we have here? Actually, he is a lord, so there is an aristocracy here. But it's a book called Shroom for Improvement by Jemma Croft. It is a mushroom fae and a magpie fae. And it is literally in the subtitle, it is called A Very Silly Fae romance, because
Oh
it
my
is.
God.
It's this shroom fae. His father has passed away and he has inherited this castle that is, it's a sentient castle, so it can speak to him in his mind. And there's some sort of ritual that he has to do on the summer and winter solstice in order to keep the house alive. Oh, I should mention that this is a mushroom based house because he's a mushroom fae. And so all of the towers are shaped like mushrooms, but really the castle just looks like a stack of dildos. Um,
Oh,
so
good Lord. That's a look. That's a look.
and so the house keeps like moving him around when he arrives to do this ritual that he doesn't know what it is because his father never told him. And the house is like sort of peeping Tom on him because it can. And so it's like, oh, well, he like jerks off in the shower and it's like, oh, well, that looked like it was a little bit painful. Are you okay? And so he's like, I don't know what this ritual is. What is it supposed to be? But there's this magpie fae who's been studying mushrooms and the art of mushrooms at the university in his town, and they've met on the train and yada yada yada. And so they end up inviting him out to be able to work through the process of figuring out this ritual. And then obviously they end up together because the sentient house is like every time that Sunny is like, I'm gonna go sleep in this room, then the couch is gone, the bed is gone, there's only one bed. They have to sleep together because the house is conspiring to get them into the same like dildo shaped tower. It's so ridiculous, Nikki. It was
This just sounds like
delightful.
if the house in Encanto was horny, is what this sounds like.
That's exactly what it is. It's a horny Encanto.
God.
All right, we need to. You know what? I don't always write Amazon reviews, but for this one, I might to be like, if you thought that Encanto needed more dildos,
Then this is the book for you.
then pick up.
It
Do not.
brings a whole new context to the song Under Pressure.
Oh God. We're gonna leave that one there, Nikki.
There you go.
You shipping this week, lady?
It's a video game. I really struggle to find video games that I like because I don't like first-person shooters. I'm bad at fighting games. Like, I love Animal Crossing, all of the Mario World games. So what I did on the weekend is I went to the Nintendo store, and I do this regularly where I just download a bunch of demos because I'm like, I just want to play a couple and see how they are. So I downloaded this one demo called Dredge. And all I knew of it was that you have a fishing trawler and you go around and you do fishing and there's some spooky shit. And I was like, okay, cool. So I downloaded the demo after I had gone through like 4 others that I was like, no, I don't like this. I don't like this one. Okay, I'm deleting this one. I don't like this. I started playing Dredge. It was so addictive. I played it for 18 hours on Saturday. So basically you're a fisherman who wakes up on this island by this mayor who's like, oh yeah, we've rescued you. Here's a boat. Your boat was completely destroyed. Pay us back for the boat and then, go amongst your business. So you start repairing this fishing trawler and you start going out and fishing around these couple of islands. And then you realize that there's some weird shit going on because the mayor says, be back by nightfall. There are things in the fog. And as you start fishing around, you start to see creatures underneath the water. You start to hallucinate what looks to be fishing boats, but no, it's a giant fish who's going to eat your boat. And then you start going on different quests to find different artifacts, and you have to catch fish and sell them to make money to like repair and upgrade your boat. You're trying to find these artifacts and you go to all these different islands, but it's really dangerous to travel at night because you have something called a panic meter, which is your character who you never see. You're just, the first person is the boat. But you have a panic meter, it starts to make you hallucinate more and creatures find you. Now, I will say I'm a wimp. I turned on passive mode, which means that you do not get spontaneously attacked by creatures out in the open ocean because that would just terrify the living shit out of me. So I turned on passive mode. But it was really fun. So I beat the game. It's got a couple different endings depending on what you do. And there's 4 expansion packs, which I might go buy one of them now that I'm almost fully upgraded my fishing trawler, but it's real creepy and has a really interesting ending for what your story actually is. Because remember, you woke up at the beginning of this video game, you don't really know who you are, and there's a mysterious lighthouse keeper that's like, you look familiar, you sound familiar, etc., etc., and then there's a big reveal at the end. So if you like games that aren't super hard to play, check out Dredge. I have it on the Nintendo Switch, and it was great. I got to catch a lot of fish and have crab pots.
It's almost like I think about Minecraft and how they have like combat, like adventure mode, I think it is, where you can be in combat, or they just have creative mode where you can build.
You just want to build shit. Yeah.
Yeah, if you just want to build shit and not get attacked. And so I always have one kid who's on adventure mode and one kid who's on creative mode. And I'm like,
yeah, I'm never do adventure mode.
Yeah. No, my little one just loves to stab things. And I'm like, if this is where you get it out, okay.
Sure. Have fun.
Sure.
Amazing. Well, that is all for us this week here on First Dates and Soulmates. A few reminders on how you can support the show. Number 1, head on over Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast from. Give us a rate, review, and subscribe because it makes us feel nice. It helps more people find out about the show, and it's greatly appreciated. You can also follow us on our social media accounts, Instagram, TikTok, and the YouTube at First Dates and Soulmates. And if you just want to chat about the show or our opinions on Laurence Olivier's Monocle, head on over to Substack and leave some comments. You can also comment on Spotify episodes if that is your platform of choice. Or you can email us at firstdatesandsoulmatespod@gmail.com. We always love to hear from you. If you do have a little bit of money to spend each month, you can head on over to our merch store at tpublic.com. The link is in the show notes for some of our favorite, most epic sayings on stickers, tote bags, t-shirts, hats, mugs, whatever you like. So be sure to check that out. You too can own a Tingles in the Groiny Bits sticker. I have one on my laptop, and I know you're very jealous. Or you can subscribe to the show on the Substacks. Subscribe to the show on the Substacks. There's a tongue twister for you today. It just helps support all the work we put into the show, and it's greatly appreciated. And that wraps us up for August. We are kicking off September next week with our 69th episode. Nice. And we are talking about student-professor romance. And boy, do we have a lot of thoughts and feelings. We will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.